Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial. So today we're actually going to cover off functions. This is a very important concept within Python. So functions are a great way to start to organize your code. It's a nice way to minimize any kind of repetitiveness, but typically you'll find functions everywhere and it's absolutely necessary to know. So today we're going to put everything that we've learned so far together and we're going to actually build a mini application. So let's start with the basic syntax of a function. To start a function, you always want to start it off with def. And def basically stands for define or definition of a function. And so we're going to call this function definition, and the function name is going to be wait underscore conversion. Now let me talk to you also a little bit about some convention within functions in Python as well. Whenever we have two separate words, you typically want to keep them separated by an underscore. You don't want to use a hyphen, or you don't want to use like a period or anything. Typical convention has always been using underscore. We'll talk about naming convention for classes as well when we get to the classes section. But for now, let's just stick to this. And Python also has something called PEP8, for those of you who don't know what that is. PEP8 is basically a document that has all the different standards of how you write Python code. Everything from the number of spaces you should have between lines to the naming convention to a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you're really interested in that and you really want to get hardcore and you want to take this professionally, I would encourage you to check out PEP8 on Google, and it will tell you everything that you need to know about the Python naming convention. All right, so going back to our function here, we have defined wait conversion, and we're going to pass it a variable, and we'll say we're going to pass it wait. So I'm actually going to change our requirements here. We are going to ask the user to tell us whether they're adding in kilograms or pounds. So let's make this a really cool function. We're going to return your weight in pounds or kilograms based on whatever you've entered in. To finish this off, we're going to close it off with a colon there. And so what this now means is I've got a weight conversion function. I'm passing through one variable, which is weight, and it's been defined as weight conversion. Okay. Now, as soon as I hit enter, you're going to see that it's going to automatically indent itself. And what that means is that anything that's under and indented this wait function is part of the function. Anytime I break out of the indentation, that means that I'm no longer within that function. So what do I want to do in this function? I want to pass in some kind of a variable weight. So let's just go up here in our requirements and say that weight is either kilograms or pounds. So that means that when the user is going to enter their weight, we have to give them an option. User enters weight. So we'll come back to defining this function in a second. Let's just go back down and see what would that user input even look like. So let's say we said print and we said input, remember that, enter your weight. So that's going to return some kind of an answer back to us. If you guess string, you're right. And the problem is you can't do a lot of integer or any kind of mathematical calculations on a string. So it's probably easier for us to convert this to a type float right from the get-go. So let's just test this out. So I'm going to comment out the function for a quick second and just test out our statement here. And really it should, whatever I type in here, it should return that back as a float. And it does, because you see that decimal place right after there. So we're good from that perspective. But now we have to go back to the user and we have to give them an option, right? So now we have to write something like print select 1 pounds to kilograms. And we could say print select 2 for kilograms to pounds. Let's see what that looks like. So it's always a good idea to debug your code along the way, because it just makes it easier for people to see whether or not they have errors along the way or not. So now we actually have to create a different input variable. And the input variable is going to be selection. We'll call it that. It's going to be equal to input, make your selection. So now let's see what this looks like. And again, always a good idea to debug your code along the way, especially if you're new to this. So now it's going to say pounds to kilograms, kilograms to pound. I could hit 2 and it's going to return 2, then I'll ask me to enter my weight. But before we do that, we need to do something with this selection variable, because now this is where the function is going to come in. And this is where I'm also going to teach you about if statements. So we're going to say if selection is equal to 1, we'll say print something, just so the function doesn't error out on me. And we'll say, so elif is the same thing as saying else if. Else if selection equals to print b. And that just means we'll do something with it yet. The other thing I want to talk to you about here is, remember earlier in the video I was talking to you about PEP8, and it says missing white space around the operator. So PyCharm is good in the sense that it's got PEP8 stuff built into it, so you can really understand it a little bit better. All right, so if we were to run this now, it's saying enter maker selection 1, and that's great, but now it's going to ask me for my weight. So let me add that back in. Okay, beautiful. All right, so now it's going to say enter your weight. So now what I want it to do is I'm going to say if I'm actually going to do selection 1. So now my definition here is I'm going to actually have two functions now. So I'm going to say define weight conversion, and I'm going to say underscore pounds to kilograms. So PTK is just pounds to kilogram, and that means I'm going to have another function because we've decided to add in the ability to do two types of conversions. We'll have a second function here that says kilograms to pounds. And again, I'm going to pass in some variable. We'll call it X here. We'll call it X here as well. And so if I'm going from pounds to kilograms, that means that if I'm passing in X, which is going to denote my pounds, I have to divide that by 2.2, and we'll say KGS is equal to this. And then we're going to say return KGS. And what that means is after I've computed this calculation, so I'm passing in, let's say I pass in 150 pounds, it's going to go here, it's going to divide it by 2.2, and it's going to return that whenever I call this function. So very similarly here, we're going to say pounds is equal to X, let's call it something else, we'll call it Y, times 2.2, and we'll say return pounds. So now, I'm actually going to move this up here, and very simply now we're going to say if selection is equal to 1, and that is, I'm going from pounds to kilograms, so PTK, then call this function. So we're going to go like this, and we'll just making sure I'm tabbing here properly. And the variable I'm going to pass in is going to be whatever we store this as. So instead of printing this, I'm just going to store this as a variable, and we'll just call it weight in general, because it could be pounds or kilograms, we don't know. And so we're going to be passing the term weight. And if selection is equal to 2, then we're going to use this function right here. And again, we're going to pass in weight as well. So let's run this, and then I'll show you exactly what it's doing. So let's stop this. Let's hit print. So selection 1, I'm going to put in 150 pounds. Oh, and the reason why it hasn't done anything, well, we haven't printed anything. So why don't we say print, and then the function's going to have the dollar value or the weight value associated with it. And we'll do the same thing here. I'll be sure to change this function over to KTP and your weight in pounds. So let's call this again, or let's print this again. Now that we've added our print statement, it should work. All right, so let's run this. We got that. And I just realized an error while I was running it. So going back, remember, we have to put these actually in floats. So this will be a float because I'm possibly going to get a decimal place. And why don't we just put this as an integer? So when I hit run, now it's actually going to register as an integer, and it's going to say your weight in kilograms is 68.18. Now let's see if the other way around works as well. So if I do 2, I do 68. Your weight in pounds is 149.6. So it actually worked out pretty easily. Now I could have put this all in one function if I wanted to. I could have put this in different multiple ways, but I wanted to keep this very simple for you guys. Okay, so let me walk you through what's happening over here, right? So we can get rid of all of this stuff right now. We don't need it. Let's just keep this very, very simple and straightforward. So let's see what's happening here. I've said select either 1 for pounds or kilograms or 2 for kilograms or pounds. Now I've taken whatever that user is going to input, because this here alone, if I were to just look at this statement here alone, including the input, is going to return a string. And when I actually go through the if statement, it's going to say if selection is equal to, and it's never going to be equal to 1 because it's going to be a string. So that's why we have to put these integers around it to convert this into an integer, so that whenever the user enters either 1 or 2, it gets captured either here or here. So let's just say that user enters 1. Now it's going to say your weight in kilograms is, it's going to take this function, weight conversion PTK, and it's going to call this function over here because that's the function that it's assigned to. We are entering in the weight, which we've put in as a type float, because if you don't do this again, it's going to pass through a string. You can't do a string divided by 2.2. It's not going to make sense. So we've taken this number in as a float. So this number now is 150 because that's what we've entered in. Let's say I enter in 150. It's going to take 150 in the weight category. So right here, it's almost like saying that. That's what the user inputted. Then it's going to take this 150 and plug it into X. Then it's going to take this number here and take it over here and basically do 150 divided by 2.2, and that's what it's going to return. So it's going to take whatever this value is, return it, and this value that it returns essentially replaces this entire statement once it's done. So it's going to say your weight in kilograms is the return value of kilograms, which is 150 divided by 2.2. And when I do the same thing for this side, let's say I enter in, 50 pounds or whatever it's going to be. So I actually manually enter in 50 pounds after I've been asked to do that. Enter your weight. I enter in 50 pounds. It's going to take that 50 pounds. It's going to pass it out of this function. And it's going to say, okay, well, I'm passing in a number. Let's make that equal to y. Y in this function, I take that and I multiply it by 2.2 and I return my weight in pounds. And this return statement then comes back and says, all right, whatever the answer is, I'm going to replace this entire thing with return pounds, in this case, which is going to be 50 times 2.2. So it's about 110 pounds or something like that. So it's going to say your weight is now 110 pounds. Now, if we didn't use functions, this would have gotten potentially very, very messy. And especially when we're going to be talking about classes in the future, you're going to see why this is so important, because we can call a method onto a class which can do a whole bunch of functions, and I know right now that makes no sense, but I promise you it will become a lot more clear as we go along. But I wanted to introduce you to functions here. Congratulations, you've built your first application. You can actually even put this on your phone, whether it's an Android, whether it's an iPhone. Walk around with it and show your friends that you've built a function, or you built an application that actually does weight conversion for you on the spot. All right, so as we move forward in some of these tutorials, we're going to start building more applications, and they're going to get more and more complicated as we go down the road, but that's the best way to learn. So I'm going to give you some homework, but I want you to make a similar conversion tool that takes the user's input and converts from Fahrenheit to Celsius, and also from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So essentially, the user's got to enter in a number in Fahrenheit, or they have to pick whether they're converting from one to the other. You're going to have to enter in that number. You're going to have to ask them, what temperature do you want to convert? You're going to have to do the conversion. You're going to have to create a function or two or whatever you think is going to be best. And then I want you to post your function in the comments and let me know if it actually works or not. Or if you don't want to post your function, just tell me that it worked, and that will make me happy. But until next time, guys, I hope this was helpful. If not, please comment. Let me know what I can do better. But until next time, please consider liking, subscribing, and I will see you again. Bye-bye.